Good morning and welcome here to Rusheen Park in Tarbert for this morning's reading of 5 poems. We decided this week to take you out from the house and bring you to some of the beauty spots around my own village. And here is one of them that I have fond memories of, where I learned to swim back in the late 50s and early 60s. I have to say poorly, because I never took to the swimming, but Rusheen played a big part in our childhood. It's now just coming up or after 8 o'clock on this Thursday morning, so we're coming a few hours earlier to you, but that was to catch the beautiful Shannon Estuary and the tide, which is now turned and it's on its way out. As always, I mentioned the Rise Foundation, which, like a lot of charities and foundations, are struggling at the moment for funds. So if you have anything extra left over at the end of every week, please go online at www.therisefoundation.ie. We're now on day 70 since the schools closed and lockdown began. Fantastic to see the easing of restrictions this week, but I think the call is from here and indeed from everywhere else to hasten slowly as we make our way back to whatever the new normality is going to bring. For sure, the last 70 days have been like nothing we've ever experienced before. For me personally, it has been a mix of that serious kind of mental challenge that comes with isolation, not being able to see your loved ones, and of course moments of sheer bliss around places like here and mornings like this morning, and the solitude that comes with that level of just peace around the place. Last night I spoke with a nurse who works in the United States in a COVID field hospital. It certainly brought to mind the seriousness of this pandemic worldwide, where I noticed this morning the number of deaths in the whole world are now at 323,415. All people with names, people with loved ones. And if anything ever needed to get across how we are really in this together, and we will see it through, that I have no doubt. So for that nurse, who's called Helen, and her day is made up of being in the full protective gear, attending to seriously ill patients from COVID in a field hospital in the United States, to going home in total isolation until her next shift begins. So this poetry reading is for Helen and indeed all our frontline workers all over the world who are today heading off for another day on the front line. I recall, I suppose, that beautiful and well-known line from William Butler Yeats' poem Easter 1916, and it brings renewed resonance in times like this. And his famous line, of course, read, "All changed utterly, a terrible beauty is born." However, we must continue to emphasize, as long as we're in this together, and my belief is that we will see it through. So welcome back to Tarbert and Shannon Estuary and Rusheen Park. It's literally along the shoreline here of the Shannon Estuary, about a half a mile from my village. And I think there's no better place to start that whole theme of today's poetry reading, nature or nurture. I leave you decide. I'm just going to read 5 poems that I think relate to that subject matter. My first poem is from that wonderful English poet William Wordsworth, who has enlightened, I suppose, poetry for over 2 centuries now. This particular poem was actually written based on an event that he and his sister had on the 15th of April 1802, when they were out and he came across long belt of daffodils. It was published in 1807, which is of course 213 years ago. Wonderful poem. It won the #1 poem by listeners to the BBC 4 poetry programme, I think, many years ago. My recollection is this is the only poem I can remember from my primary school days here in Tarbert. There's a lot of sadness in this man's life as well, and I think it might explain particularly his last verse, when he talking about in a pensive mood, thinking about daffodils. But he actually lost his father. He lost his mother when he was only 7, his father when he was 11, and 3 of his immediate family predeceased him. So I think it gives a little context to today's to this poem, Daffodils, or Wandered Lonely as a Cloud. I wandered lonely as a cloud by William Wordsworth. I wandered lonely as a cloud that floats on high o'er vales and hills, when all at once I saw a crowd, a host of golden daffodils, beside the lake, beneath the trees, fluttering and dancing in the breeze. Continuous as the stars that shine and twinkle on the Milky Way, they stretched in never-ending line along the margin of a bay. 10,000 saw I at a glance, tossing their heads in sprightly dance. The waves beside them danced, but they outdid the sparkling waves in glee. A poet could not but be gay in such a jocund company. I gazed and gazed, but little thought what wealth the show to me had brought. For oft when on my couch I lie, in vacant or in pensive mood, they flash upon that inward eye, which is the bliss of solitude. And then my heart with pleasure fills, and dances with the daffodils. So I'm going to move quickly on to my second poem, which is much closer to home, really. But like Tarbert, there are wonderful, wonderful spots, nature, haunts, all over Ireland. I was once asked, where's my second favourite county after Kerry? And it's unquestionably, it immediately comes to mind, it's County Mayo. I just love everything about it. The people are friendly, there's a softness about them, and I spend some time in a place called Cluna, outside of Westport, in a health retreat from time to time. Beautiful spot right under Crowpatrick, where we walk for a week and try and get fit. So the next poem is about County Mayo. It's about written by that famous Irish poet Anton O'Rafferty, or Raftery as we knew him in school. I do think and can recall that we learned some of his Irish poems in secondary school. He was blinded by smallpox, another pandemic at the time, and for years he moved between Tuam, Gort and Crockwell, where he died in 1835, and he was probably known as the bard, the local bard. I love it. It's about his own place, Killadown or Creedon, and it definitely summarises for me the beauty in a small few lines of what a place, what nature can mean. I came across it last week when I was looking at the poem by Gabriel Fitzmaurice. So Killadown. Now spring is upon us, the days will be stretching, and after the biddy I'll heist up and go, since I've decided there'll be no returning, till I stand in the middle of County Mayo. In the town of Claremorris I'll spend the first evening, and in Ball below in the first drinks will flow. then to Kilshima travel, to spend a whole month there, barely 2 miles from Ballinamore. I set down forever that my spirit rises, like fog as it scatters and wind starts to blow, when I'm thinking of Cara or Bal below, or Scavila, or the plain of Mayo. Kill-Aedoin, the fertile, where the fruits are growing, blackberries, raspberries, full-fruited each one, and if I were standing among my own people, the years they would leave me, again I'd be young. So of course just that phrase there of the biddy is St. Bridget's Day, or the first day of spring. So that's that lovely poem about place and nature and what our country has to offer, and so I'm just trying to get looking across here, across the bay and up the Shannon, and I'm going to follow that by 2 poems that I wrote myself, and they're contained in the Mind the View poem, our book. They were difficult poems for me to write, I think, in that I was trying to convey the richness of difference and what it is to be different. I love nowadays where we have so many different cultures in our country, the richness that they bring, a different Ireland altogether to what I grew up in, and so much richer as a result. Anyway, I'll leave you to decide for yourself. I tried to do this explanation of difference using a metaphor with the seal and the butterfly. Garnish Island. There once was a seal who dreamt of being a king on an island where fauna, flora and spirits stood still. Riding his amphibian chariot, he searched until he found a soulmate that seemed to know his lifelong wailing sound. Nearby, a free-spirited butterfly was simply smitten too, a metamorphic creature of great beauty, hummed out loud a love song before releasing into the wild a message that only seals and butterflies could comprehend. Now this unlikely meeting of 2 mates could only take place in their minds, distanced from demented, distracted crowds who would only stop, stare, smirk and gawk at a seal who is a king, in love with his butterfly princess. A past they cannot change, a present can only frame, a future that even they are too afraid to contemplate. The follow-up to that poem was called The Sequel, and it talks about coming off that island in Garnish Island. The Sequel. Carved out in 2 tablets of stone, handcrafted here on Garnish Island, 2 granite pieces of rock record who we were, all those odds stacked against us. We push on, our mysterious terra firma behind, our personal sunken treasure island, where the seal and the butterfly still procreates in blissful harmony. Through the fresh green foliage of Guggenborough, we rest a while in the strong arms of St. Finbar. Holy waters silently covering our secret lives. 2 white candles emit 1 single eternal flame. Our diverse gods bear witness to difference. True love driven underground into eternity. So that's those 2 poems about combining, I hope, nature and nurture, and how love conquers everything. And I'm going to finish this morning back in my own place here in Tarbert with a poem that I was first introduced to by a great friend, Thomas Donovan, the late Thomas Donovan, whom I can tell you used to sing this song at a drop of a hat, called The Rose of Tarbert Town. I actually have to find it here now, so you'll have to bear with me. It was written by D.C. Hennessy, who later became known as the blind poet of Kerry, and this whole book given to me by Thomas's widow Priscilla some years ago, The Lays of North Kerry and Other Poems and Sketches. I know it's towards the end here. Yeah, we have it here. So I'm going to dedicate this to my great friend Thomas Donovan. He lived actually just less than 100 yards from where we're standing, and he loved this poem, and he was very proud of his native place, and I thank him for passing on this poem and everything that's behind it. The Rose of Tarbert Town by D.C. Hennessy. We first met with joyous pride down beside the island strand, where the Shannon's lordly tide sweeps along with echoes grand. When a mutual friend just there, who was with her walking down, introduced this maiden fair as the Rose of Tarbert Town. Oh, the music of her voice, so bewitching, sweet and low, well might make your heart rejoice in its darkest hour of woe. May the muses blithe and strong chant her praises and renown, and entwine gay wreaths of song for the Rose of Tarbert Town. In her eyes of liquid blue, witching spells of beauty bright shed a light which none can view without feelings of delight. And how sweetly flows her hair in rich tresses of fair brown, o'er the neck and brow so fair of the Rose of Tarbert Town. May no sadness spread its gloom o'er the bright smiles which repose on her dimpled cheeks, which bloom with the radiance of the rose. And oh, never may a trace of an angry look or frown cloud the brow or smiling face of the Rose of Tarbert Town. In a quiet, sheltered nook, where a sombre building stands, near a little singing brook, we last parted and shook hands. What emotions that were mine, with a throbbing heart bowed down in fond homage at the shrine of the Rose of Tarbert Town. Though we never more may meet, every feeling of the heart shall with fond devotion beat still for her till life depart. Oh, in that dread final hour, may a glorious heavenly crown be, I pray, the future dower of the Rose of Tarbert Town. So that's a poem that was written also back in the 1800s, and I leave and finish up today's readings with that poem about my place. Back again next week. This time we're going to read, along with some of my own poems, but poems that have been sent to me by people from indeed all over, and I hope to have a new poem that came to me from Tenerife and kind of reflects the issues around COVID-19 in that country as well. So until we meet again, thank you again for your joining in and your support. Please continue with your comments. They all help to shape the next readings, and I leave you with this beautiful scenery as the tide goes out here on Tarbert Bay on this beautiful warm May morning. Slán agus Beannacht.